you go.
All right, I think we're going to get started. So we should all say thank you to Dynatrace for providing the pizza and the speakers. So, yeah. I'm just going to hand it over to Asad.
Thank you. My name is Asad. I'm a product specialist at Dynatrace. I've been with the company for over 5 years. And I've done a lot of different things with the company, post-sales, pre-sales. And for the last 1 year, or even a little bit longer than that, I've been focusing on DevOps, especially the performance factor that comes in DevOps. And as you guys can see from my accent, I'm from Boston. I have a very strong Boston accent. What I want to talk about today is some of the key metrics that are required, or so that we see a lot at our customer base, at our prospect base, that are key when you start developing software, when you take it from your development environment all the way to production, as well as you collaborate in operations and development to find issues quickly and resolve issues quickly. There are metrics that are essential for you to look at, and that's the metric that I want to talk about today. And these are this is real data from either from our own labs or from our customer base. How many of you are doing DevOps? I know there's a little bit loose definition of DevOps, or people are doing different things. Like you guys are doing it, okay. Yeah, one of the things that I have, I often speak to a lot of customers, there's of course different definition of DevOps. Also, there are different things that you need to do about DevOps, from people, from management, from the whole process, and then going into technologies and looking at metrics. So I'm going to focus only on the metrics. There are other things that you need to do to make DevOps happen, but that is not in control of a lot of us, but we can look at the metrics point of view. And as I go through that, if you have questions, if you have thoughts, please jump in. Love to have more interactive session. So going back to some of the example of our customer base, Capital One, they went from waterfall approach of development, taking long time. They went into agile mode, took them 3 years to do that. But with that, now what they are doing is they are doing one deployment per month. At that pace, they're deploying near code, one code deployment per month. When you look at DevOps at Target, what we are seeing is there are 30 APIs, lot of deployments per week. There are a lot of traffic on their site. They're pushing code into their production at a very fast rate. And then other thing, the beauty here in these numbers is that they're getting less than 10 incidents per month. Which is huge, because in DevOps or any other software development, you definitely want to push data fast, but you want to also keep the number of incidents to the lowest level. So why are they doing it? And this is, I was speaking to a lot of customers, and this should not be a surprise for you guys, is because of this. And we have customer base that is changing. We have a lot of mobile users for mobile native apps, as well as customers using mobile, to even children using mobile now, to learn as well as engage with your data. What is happening in this whole process is that the expectations from these customers have changed. They don't care what is happening in your data center. They don't care about the network. They don't care about the device. They care about the end user experience. And for them, the most important thing, if it is slow, if it crashes, it's your problem, it's not their problem. And then they have the social media, the app sites, and as well as to complain about it, to give you bad reviews if the things go bad. So this is what is changing the whole thing. And also we have newer companies coming, not newer all the way, but you can see that interesting companies coming up that really are building software as an infrastructure, but they really do not own, they do not create the content. If you look at Facebook, they have the whole thing, but they really do not produce any content. Contents are people like us who are creating contents for them. If you look at Uber, they don't own any taxis, any cars, but they have built the software. So now what they are trying to do is, all these companies are trying again to create that user experience that makes their customers come back over and over again to use their software. And another thing that we are seeing a lot is this shift. Like there's a huge amount of customer base as well as companies coming from the Asian part, from China and India and this region of the world, which are newer companies that are competing. If you look at Uber, for example, has 1 million shared taxis per day. Uber has 1 million. But if you look at Didi, which is based in now the biggest competition for Uber in China, they have 5 million. So this whole competitive nature, basically, even in India, Uber is competing with a local taxi company or a local similar company like Uber. I forgot the name of it. But
Ola cabs.
Ola cabs, yes. Again, the idea here is you want to have that experience for the customer, that you steal the customers from your customer base. That's the reason you want to not only add more and more features to your software, but make it such that they do not fail and they make the end user experience much more nicer, as well as so that customers come back to you over and over again. So what is happening is like we are seeing a lot of change in the marketplace, and then we are also seeing a lot of requirements, and the user expectation is changing every day. I'm sure you guys who are looking into DevOps have looked at these two books, at least the Phoenix Project. I love that book. I heard Gene Kim as well as George Pfeffer, who is from Gartner, talk about that and amazing insight that they provided beside this book. Okay. So the goal here is that you have your customer base, you have your users, you have your market, you have an idea about your software, your business idea you have, and the ultimate goal that you want to have is to minimize bringing your idea to the market so that you can capitalize on it. So basically, that when you capitalize on it, you make the money, you steal the customers, you keep the customers. That's the end goal of DevOps. And the ROI that you get is you are able to deploy much more software at much more faster time. You get more faster lead times. I look at the statistics where Gene Kim from Phoenix Project was talking about that Amazon is deploying a piece of code every 11.6 seconds into production. We have customers, we have people like LinkedIn, Facebook that are deploying code at such a faster pace. A lot of this code also really, when I was talking to some of them, is that they're really deploying this code even though this code is really not visible to the end users. They're deploying it, testing it out in the background. When they find it that is working well, then they make it more visible to the end users. So deploying code just doesn't mean that you're deploying it to make it available as well as visible to the end users. You also want to have faster time to recovery. When you're deploying smaller pieces of code, like LinkedIn and a lot of other customers are deploying code into some subset of their application or some subset of users. They test it out for half a day, they realize that there's a problem, they pull it out, and nobody, like very small subset of end users suffer from that. So they have quick fixes and they're able to recover pretty fast. So ultimate goal is to do this so that you are able to quickly remedy the problem. The challenge is that you're deploying faster, that's the goal, but you also, it's also that you're learning from this. We have customers that, again, like LinkedIn, who are learning, and they've done a fantastic job over time that they realize that they fail fast, fix it, pull it out, and you're good again. Right? Again, the idea is to have the right focus to make sure that you are deploying faster with the minimum number of instances per month. So what you ultimately want to do is you don't want to have this on your page, right? Unless you are Microsoft or Google, who love to have something like this, right? Because this is again your end user performance. I was looking at Apple's site last Friday, and it was down, or the site did not come up for almost 20 minutes. And we have our own tools that we keep an eye on a lot of different companies, and we saw a huge delay at Apple site. And even to store our Apple, we could not go. This is as late as early as last week. And also you don't want this. You don't want your mobile apps to be just spinning. Again, the end user doesn't care. This is from the FIFA, where the application has a crash or just spinning forever. So what I've been doing, and some of the other colleagues of mine have been doing, is collecting all this information from customers, and my hope is to bring again some of the information today to you guys. So some of the use cases, so these are real examples now. So first is that you have this thing about, oh, we need to go mobile. This is typically, we have seen somebody from the management comes up with the idea that we need to go mobile, and then people are already mobile. Now you are struggling to come up with a plan to go make your application mobile. So then what happens in that process, you're putting things in quickly, trying to put things together quickly, and you test it out, but when it goes in production, it changes, the whole behavior changes, or they have big impact. For example, this is again the real data. This is the mobile landing page for one of the Super Bowl ads of this year. We looked at the data for this particular site, and what we are seeing is that the total site is it has the size of the page is 20 MB. They're downloading so much content for CSS, JavaScript, and images that the page has so much load in it that it's taking forever to load that page. And even if you look at some of the metrics here, you can see that they're downloading 230 JPEG images, 75 PNGs, and so on. These things again are real in the sense that in a process to make things go faster as well as trying to implement the plan, if you do not think about it, if you do not plan for it, you come into this kind of situation where you push it out there, and now the site is so heavy that the end users are experiencing slowness in the site. We have a customer back in Boston that did all this testing on their test environment. Everything looked good, but when they deployed that same thing in production, the site started taking lot more time than what they saw in test environment. And the reason was that when they were testing it in their test environment, everything was local. Everything. You had a question? Sorry. So everything was local. All the data centers, all the components were local. When they deployed that in production, one of the web services call, that was one component was making to another component. The web service call was going all the way from the East Coast to the data center in the West Coast. That was the setup in production. So when you look at the data, but however, when they were testing that in test, everything was local, so everything was executing much more faster. So it's again important that you look at the metrics like that, so that when the operations guys look at this data, they can quickly find out what's going on and can connect with the development folks to quickly fix it. Other thing is, this is interesting that we found this year for the FIFA World Cup again, is this. When we analyzed their site, we found that the biggest item on the page was 370 kilobyte, and the component was the favicon, which is the favorite icon, which is the left corner small piece on your browser. 370 kilobyte for that thing. It's like, doesn't make sense, but this again is like when you're trying to push something without thinking about it, without planning for it, it just have impact on your end users. Even when you look at other components on that site for FIFA.com, which is globally visible site, huge amount of data that's going through to the site. Even some of the CSS and JS files are very big on this site. When we looked at the mobile app, it's just spinning forever. Even the mobile web, this problems become even worse when you're looking at the score on your mobile devices, because your network bandwidth may not be as strong as on your desktop browser. And so what we have done, what this tells us is that even big companies sometimes are struggling with this kind of concept because they're coming up with a plan, they're not planning very well or not testing very well. So the items to think about is the look at the page size, look at the number of items you have. Maybe you want to cache your data in the browser. Maybe you want to do a lot more web server caching. Maybe you want to decrease the size of your images. Maybe you want to do, maybe instead of like Yahoo and Google does, where you have, even if you have 50 images, they download only one image, shard the image into different pieces, and display that to the end users. Because you're only downloading one image at a time. Other part is the no agile development. Same thing again, going back to the Super Bowl from this slide. I don't know whether you guys remember, this is a Kia ad. They spent $12 million on this ad for the Super Bowl. And what happened is that when they, after the ad ran through, when we looked at, when we monitored their site, we saw that this is when the ad went on air, and immediately after that, there were so many hits on the site that the site was not able to hold the number of requests that it was getting. So the availability of the site went almost from 100% to 40%, and at one time, it was not available at all. It became 0% availability drop at this point. Because the ad, people were jumping on the site trying to follow up on the same ad, following up the ad on the website.
That was during the game, it was about 9 o'clock?
Yes, so this is 8:39, this is before 9:15, 9:10. Right?
Are the spikes, you think, they tried to scale?
No, because I think they did not scale at all, right?
Well,
So
after that.
after that,
2 commercials?
Yeah.
no,
Give
first
up,
line down,
people
second line
give up
down.
at- people give up at 9:30 or people bring more.
My first sign, yeah.
I'm gonna make a sign.
So instead,
Yeah, I think they could have tried to scale here, or may not be. Maybe
First
that
half,
because
second half.
because the site became so less, maybe a lot of people abandoned it, and then there are it became better, but again more people jumped in and then started showing this sort of pattern. When you look at the same thing for GoDaddy, which did the similar ad, their site actually, this is the response time for their ad. This is not the availability. But if you look at that, their response actually became better after the ad went in. So we analyzed it, what are they doing which Kia is not doing? And really what they did is they were very conscious about the fact that when the ad goes in Super Bowl, they knew that people are going to jump on the site. They scaled down the site. They made everything more static, cache everything. It was not a complex site anymore, unlike Kia. So the people who went there, because chances are people are going to your main page or few popular links, and they may not go to other pages. So they made those, scale down those pages, they still responded pretty well. People got what they wanted and they were happy with the site. And then when the ad went out, later on, they reverted back to the full dynamic page and more complex page later on. So they were kind of changing the things on the fly, so the end user response time still looks good. The end user are able to see what they wanted to see. So especially when I look at these numbers, when you spend $12 million on the ad and your site is not able to cope with it, that's a huge loss that you have. And as well as the biggest thing that when I talk to customers is the brand. This is the brand damage you're doing when your site is down. So 1 hour before Super Bowl and 1 hour after game ended. During this time, they just scaled down the site.
So they deployed different versions of the code?
Yes, they deployed different version, and after that, also because everybody is keeping an eye on that, they typically see that 1 hour after the ad, chances of people going back to the site is less. Or after the Super Bowl, generally 2-3 days after the Super Bowl, the people still go to the sites. After that, people really don't go too much unless they really want to buy something. So here, they quickly switched and pushed the new versions here. This is the scaled down version. This is back to the normal version, which I think is a great strategy, right? Or unless you can do You can scale up your application in the cloud or in cluster and in so much that you can take the load. And also this is a great strategy here where you know that your customers or end users are going to really see 2-3 pages and they're not going to go too far. Scale them down, still provide all the information, but chances are people are not really going to go daddy to find out that how much domain costs, how much it costs to get a domain, what is the yearly subscription. They're more interested in some of the fancy ad that they saw at Super Bowl. So the total number of domains, and we'll look at the size of your website. Right? That's the key message here. Again, don't assume you know the environment. You're building things and you are assuming that it will be a certain way. And what I mean by that, this is from one of our customer, and the customer is fantastic. I don't know, this is like a Fitbit in Europe. They just recently got acquired by Adidas, great acquisition for Adidas here. A big customer for us for the mobile side. But the problem here is this. They have a mobile app that you can run, you can bike, and it will track how much kilometers you have traveled by running or biking. And what they saw is that there was a bug in the app where it was showing that somebody did 480 kilometer riding in 1 hour. And that was like, especially for them, because like any mobile app which is tracking your activity, once I'm done with my 10-mile run, first thing I want to do is post my timing on Facebook to let my friends know. And if I come up with something like this is like frustrating for me because this is not real. And this is exactly what happened to a real users in Europe. So what they did is they ran the same app. They find out that the location for the sensors or the operating system, the Android operating system, they first found out that the problem was happening only in the Android devices. It was happening only in one version of Android device or operating system. What that told them is that they need not spend hours and hours looking at all the code. This information helped them focus on that operating system of Android. And when they look back at online, they quickly find out that there's a bug in Android operating system, which is out of their own control, that was giving the wrong location and the map GPS coordinates. What they knew that they cannot fix it, but what they could do is they immediately post it on their site saying that if you're running this certain version of Android, you will have this problem. And they also very well clearly indicated to the customer saying that it's beyond our control, is because of Android. But again, if they had not had this kind of information handy with them, it would have again damaged their brand. By at least identifying what the problem is, as well as posting that information on their site, they were able to immediately rectify the problem and save the brand. Other problem that we see is third-party calls. We have looked at a lot of pages. We have seen websites that are making 100 or 1,000 third-party calls. You import data, you put a JavaScript on your page that you borrow or you download from somewhere, you put on your page, and that in turn makes call to some other third-party site that you don't know. We were analyzing data for one of our customers, and when they looked at the data, they saw that their site was making calls to XXX sites. It's like there's no way, they could not believe that their website is making calls to all these porn sites. When they looked at the code, they realized that it is some piece of code that they have imported that in turn was making call to these sites. And that what is happening in this example, for example, there are third-party calls, the number of third-party calls that are going out when some customer is trying to log in. And it is making call to Facebook, and the login to Facebook was taking time. That was impacting their own site. Again, that is affecting your brand. So some customers, knowing this data, they move a lot of these third-party calls at the bottom and the footer of the page, so the rest of the page is rendered. Customers are able to interact with your site, with your page, while the footer is still being rendered, people are still able to use it. So again, having this knowledge that you are making call to third party, you are making call to third party in your site, and the response of the third party helps you to quickly design and optimize your site so that you are not affected by third party calls.
Now, was it Facebook or was it somebody else who was making the call for sites?
No, it was not Facebook.
Oh, it was not
No.
Okay.
In this example, what I'm saying is that in this example, this customer is making call to Facebook, and that is taking time. But
But not calling for
No,
sites
no.
necessarily.
nah,
Right.
because a lot of times we just grab a JavaScript and put it on page. We don't know what else it is doing. So when you look at that, look at the functional errors and look at the third party calls. Again, the key metrics for your site, for the response. The other thing that we have suffered ourselves is we are blindly using existing customer components. For example, we wanted to, we have a trial version of our software like everybody else. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to see how many customers are downloading our pages and how many registering on the site, how many people are getting the license and all that. So what we did is we wanted to get a simple report like this. And this is from our lab data. We said, okay, this person was invited, this person accepted the invitation, we wanted a report like this. This is a simple report, nothing fancy in this. So the person who was an intern in a company, what he did is he built us the whole thing using the Java Hibernate OR mapping tool. He downloaded the sample code, he quickly built it, tested in his desktop, everything looks good. When we did the same thing in real production in our own thing, we realized that this thing, instead of taking few seconds, was taking minutes. And the reason was when we analyzed our own data with our own tool, we realized that to generate that kind of report, we are making 4,000 SQL statements per report. And this is because and also even though each search statement is running very, very fast, it's running almost in like 1 milliseconds or 2 milliseconds max, each SQL statement. But when you multiply by 4,000, the response time gets worse. And this is nothing but the join of 2 tables or 3 tables max. There's nothing fancy here. But what is problem here is when we test this kind of things in our development environment, we are working with 100 rows. When we go into production, we talk about million rows or billion rows. And when you Cartesian join 2 tables, it becomes even worse. So looking at or downloading a component like an OR mapping tool, anything else, out of the box, they work in certain way. But it's very, very important to tweak it to understand how they fit your needs. So that you do not suffer from something like this. So the whole total sum of only the database call was taking 6 seconds for us, which is huge. Other thing to keep in mind is I have seen, this is from our data set, I have seen a customer data set where the same SQL is being called many, many times. Same SQL, why? Why not use caching? Why not cache the data so that you improve the response time? Or why not maybe call one store procedure in the database, get the data that you want, and use it. I've seen customer base who had make a call to the database, get millions of rows into their application tier, then filter the data in the application tier, and out of 1 million records, they only care for 100 records. They discard the rest of it. So there's a huge cost on your performance because now you're getting not only 1 million records, you're getting a lot of garbage collection in your tier, your response time hurts a lot. And again, this is a typical example when you are doing it, testing it in dev environment, everything goes very well because you're mostly working with a smaller data set. When you go into production, it becomes worse. And this is something that we have learned ourselves. I've seen this happen at a lot of customer base also. deployment gone bad. Again, this is where you have, this is an example from again a real customer where, again, if you look at that in the test environment, they're looking at it's taking around 42 seconds for the response, which may not be the best, but it's not that bad. You can see all the different tiers. You can see also that they're making almost 1,600 calls to the database in the test environment. Same thing, when they did the same thing with deployed in production, it became 8 times slower. It becomes 5 minutes for the same transaction to take instead of taking 42 seconds. Again, this is where, as a DevOps, you want to quickly, the operations guys need to quickly get this metrics, pass this metrics to the dev guys so that they can look at the data in real time and try to figure out what's going on. And in this example, what they found out is in test environment, most of the time was spent in the web server, which is kind of fine because your web server is delivering a lot of images, a lot of CSS, a lot of JPEG and all that. But whereas when they looked at the same data in production, they saw that Hibernate, some common monkey, which is custom monkey, which is another API, that is taking time, and XML processing was taking time. Very different pattern than what they saw in test. And when they dig more deeper into this, what they found out is that, looking at more detailed data here, is that they realized that when the operations team deployed the code, they changed the XML processing, they changed the version of it, they upgraded to the latest version for the XML processing, and three different tiers. And they quickly found out that the version that they upgraded to had a bug in it that was causing the slowness in the response time. So what they were expecting is this, and what they got is this. So this is, again, something that we have seen in real life. This is not from our lab or something like this. Is really we have seen multiple times at customer side where instead of using, basically you can see that they are using different XML processing and they're using different versions of other APIs. Class loading was also triggered because of custom monkey, which is a different parser that they use, and they also changed the XML parser here. So when you look at this, again, the bottom line here is look at the time spent in each API. Again, you need to look at from the API, from the test environment, and you look at the API in your production and compare that. Again, these metrics are important because if you do not have the base of these metrics in your test or QA environment or in your development environment, you really don't know what to expect in production. If you say in production, the API is taking 3 seconds, that in itself may be okay or may not be okay because you want to know how much was it taking in test. Was it taking 1 second or milliseconds in test? Now it's taking 3 seconds in production. You need those metrics to really be able to compare between dev and operations and production. So basically, here is the fact that you want to look at the resources that you're using, look at the page size. These are all the things that we see over and over again. Look at from what I'm talking about here is 2 things. Is look at your front end, look at your website beside, look at the back end, look at your database. All of these things are playing an important role in your response time to the end users, because end user really doesn't care which angle is, or which API, or which third-party component, or which database call is taking time. But from getting a good DevOps going on and key metrics that you want to capture this information so that you can compare and quickly find out where things are going wrong. So the question is, how do we go from manual testing to really making it automation, like automating the whole thing? And I was talking to a few of you, and I think you said that you're using Jenkins, using Chef, you're using Puppet, or maybe Ansible to really make it automated, which is great because what you want to do is when you deploy, when you make automated, you make nightly builds, you want to look behind the scene. And what I mean by behind the scene is, we have customers now deploying, you really using DevOps, and what they're doing is, every night or every build that happens every hour or every night, they are capturing the information about how much was my functional test, what was my response time in the previous build compared to this build. You want to compare those. You also want to know that one of the challenges that what happens during the nightly builds is that you may not have the most strongest infrastructure to test the response time. But you really still want to know whether somebody has checked in a code now which is making a lot more database call than the previous version. So your response, you may not care about response time, but you may still care about some of the metrics, like whether somebody checked in the code that is making a lot more remoting calls or a lot more database calls. Because if you find that early on, you can fix it and let it not promote to QA and then ultimately go into production. For example, if you do a build, so you do a test build number 17, you do test purchase, you do test search, and the response, and you get everything works fine functionally, you move to the next build. Right? Suppose you build 17 had everything looking good, in build number 18, which happened an hour later or next day, you realize that the test purchase is failed because your load testing tool told you that there are exceptions happening, errors happening. So then what you do is you fix the build, you make the changes and you fix the build, and everything looks good on the surface. But if you really look behind the scene, and it's important to look at behind the scene is, when you are doing the build number 17, you want to get a baseline. You want to know, you may want to care about how many SQL statements are being done for purchase, how many SQL statements are being executed for search. You want to know how many exceptions are happening, you want to know how many remoting calls are happening. You want to get this baseline. Because what this baseline will help you do is this. Here in build number 18, you realize that it had failed because your load testing tool told you that a lot of exceptions or errors are 404 errors are happening or other errors are happening. And when you look behind the scene, you said, yes, that is true. That instead of getting one exception, which is my baseline, or 0 exception, which is my baseline for purchase, now I have 5 exceptions. I need to fail this build. I need to get it fixed before I promote it to production or QA. But even when you look at this build number 19, everything looked good on the surface of your application or from the load testing tool because there was no error. But if you really want to know what's happening, it's important for you to know what's happening behind the scene. In this case, even though build number 19 shows that everything is green, if you look behind the scene, you may find out that instead of making 12 database calls, you're making 75 now. Nothing has failed, everything looked good, everything functioned well. But somebody has checked in the code now which is making 75 database calls. So even though this is green, it should not be promoted at all. So these metrics that I talked about in the beginning of the talk, capturing those metrics are very key so that you can say, even though this looks okay from the surface, this really should not be promoted. What you eventually need to do is go back, fail this build, go back to build number 20, and you come back to this level. Once you have this data which is captured behind the scene by any of the performance monitoring tool, you then will be able to compare your baseline with every build and then say, am I ready to promote it to the next level or not? Are you guys using any tools to really get this kind of data? Are you using like load runner or other tools to really generate the load when you do through development or nightly builds? Are you getting any of these kind of metrics? Any of you? So let me ask you this is, when you are doing your nightly builds, and especially as you are taking on the DevOps thing, what are the measuring stick to say that yes, less promote it or less fail it? How do you kind of what kind of thing helps you to make a decision whether to promote it or
One
not?
of the scenarios, most of the times in my previous experience, not the present company, but previous, before when we are studying that build is pass, we used Splunk one time, and that is one of the tools which will extract the logs of server logs and web and app and even all the logs, and we will analyze that. We mostly care about the response time, and there are some other factors which will count, pull it from Splunk APIs, and we'll integrate that Splunk return data to our XML data, and then we represent it here.
Okay.
When we match that, if something is going beyond that, like we have a threshold of some 20% beyond and later. Sometimes it might be 20% okay, sometimes 20% less, but it should not cross that. Once it crosses the total response time X, depends on A, B, C, D, E factors.
Yeah.
That's how we measure it.
Okay. So I think what I heard is that when you do the test, you're putting the information to log, sending that information of log into Splunk, and then comparing plus minus 20% on that, which is again a valid way to do it. The only thing that sometimes I find in that is that just because you have to log it to the log file, your I/O impacts your performance, right? Because now you have to make sure that somebody is writing to the log properly for you. So you're dependent on the developer to make sure that he or she is writing the right log in the right format so that Splunk or any other tool can read it, right? So, and I have seen customers or even this part here, it is failing because the load runner tool tells you that it encountered 404 or 400 errors on the site and immediately fails it. That's another thing that I've seen customers doing. Having this data a little bit more insight, either using Splunk or any other tool, really helps you to understand when it is green, should it still be green or not. Right? Again, you need discipline to make sure that the developers are writing to the log file into the format that the tool like Splunk can read it and process it quickly. Other thing that you may want to do is, when you look at the logging, for example, you may want to see, again, here, when I talk about here, again, I'm not focusing on the performance because in nightly builds, performance may not be important. What you may care about is in the unit test is more. You may care more about the counts. You may want to know how many SQL statements are happening, how many remoting calls are happening. But when you switch to performance test, which is in the QA environment or post QA, you may again want to capture whether there are login happening, which is earlier was looking good, but something has changed in the code that is now going into your area when it is going over the threshold that you have defined, or plus minus 20% that you define. So you want to capture this so that you can say whether I'm ready to promote it in production or not.
Actually, the point what you said, it nightly build matters always for some products. Like for example, if we see that I worked in different product companies when they're doing the nightly build, each and every build performance matters a lot for taking a decision of that build going to be approved or not, because the whole product, on top of that, there are a lot of applications building. So one performance issue may cause the impact to all entire clients.
Right.
So generally, in most of the product companies I worked in Oracle, BPM, and different product companies. That time my experience is that a single SQL call increase was the reason for stopping the build.
Yeah.
So that's my experience.
I think when I almost 7 years back when I was writing Java code and WebLogic, I would see that in our own project, there was an overmapping tool that we built our own. We didn't buy any, we didn't use anything from the market. Even though Hibernate was available, we didn't use it. We built our own. That was the biggest mistake we ever did. Because that overmapping tool would, again, as I mentioned, will go to the database, get million records from it, keep 100 that it wants, throw away the rest of it. So any change, any SQL that you write, and that has, instead of getting 1 million rows, now make it 10 million rows, will impact the performance so bad that the system was not usable at all. So if I can go back in time, I would of course take away this whole logic of pulling all the data from the database. But more importantly, I'll use this same methodology where I want to create a baseline about how much data I'm getting from a database, create that baseline, and make sure that I keep a very close eye on it, so that anybody writes a code that is now making that similar kind of thing, as you said, a SQL statement, or using an OR mapping tool, or maybe adding more web services call or remoting call, instead of making 5 web services call, making 50 of them, that can have a huge impact, especially in production where my system may be distributed all over the world. I may have data center in San Francisco, Singapore, and Europe. Those calls are very, very, very expensive over the WAN network. Even though I may have a geeky network or much stronger network, the calls are still very, very expensive.
Just to kind of add on what I've seen and used, we use different branches for different builds.
Okay.
So for some situations, we wouldn't even want to check that, just look at the different builds. So, because like if we're doing a development branch, there'll be like commits that we know the tests are going to fail in the development branch, but then we're pushing in there so that other people can get their kind of view of that, and we can do code reviews if we need to, if we run into some kind of weird situation. But I mean, just from an architecture perspective,
Yeah.
do you generally do that like on when you have multiple branches? Do you generally do this kind of testing on all the different branches, or just the specific kind of branches that are destined for kind of that deployment structure?
So if I will focus on those branches that are focused on more, that will be ultimately be packaged and go into the QA environment. I may have separate builds going on, branches going on, but I know that some of them may collapse into, I may have 5 branches, but I may promote only 2 of them to QA. I may only focus on these metrics for those. For others, I know already that they may not go forward into the QA environment at all, then I would not care about it.
So just targeting the QA environment.
Yeah, because over and over again, and you guys already know that, is that the fix that you do in your development environment is so cheap to fix it compared to production. So you want to catch this as early as possible. And again, if you already know that a branch is going to have some significant changes, but you know that ultimately that branch will not be promoted to QA, then you may skip this step, right? But again, the question is, I have also seen customers who have done a build, and they call this build as a golden build, so that they always compare, even they create a different branch, they always compare it with the golden build, just to make sure that is there a significant change happening in the branch, or is it a smaller change that happened in the branch? So depends upon different situation, but ultimately goal is that if I'll promote to QA, this I would not, this I would not, but this I would, right? So based upon which one I'm going to, or if this is one branch, you have another branch which has similar results or different kind of results, I only care about the branch that I'll be promoting to QA. That's my key factor.
Are you only collecting metrics at build time? Or is this ongoing, like, while it's running?
So we are capturing metrics in the whole life cycle of the product. So we are capturing a development, in build time, in QA time, in performance test time, in pre-production. We have customers that are doing staging environment before they promote it. So we are testing it every stage, because what happens is that in development you may do some tests from your local browser, and you may do a load test, or you may do nightly build that runs JUnit test or some unit test. When you go into QA, you're generating a lot of load using load runner or any other tool. That means you're simulating hundreds or 200s of users at the same time. But when you go into staging or pre-production, you may ask your real users or internal employees to launch a browser and test out different functionality. Then you are really, at the time, really launching real browsers, and now the performance may include not only your web requests, but all the JavaScript, all the things that you also want to capture before you want to put in production. And of course, when you're in production, you're capturing everything all the time, right? Because you need to know as early as possible and as soon as possible when something is broken. Like we have customers that are purely using, like for example, Load Runner, which is a great tool. But what it does, it doesn't launch a real browser. So then you have to include Selenium or something else like that to really run through all the JavaScript, all the CSS, all to make sure that the JavaScript is not slowing down your application. That's how you will know whether your browser is making third-party calls, and that could be slowing down your system. And there are, even after all those things, there are some chances that things get slipped into production. You want to capture that and then.
So, can this do automated testing like Selenium does? Like custom checks or certain things you want to check?
Yes. So there are things that, so one thing that, when question is, when you've done, let me go back here. This is what we do a lot. When we work with the customers, we do pay special attention to this. And this is becoming more and more important right now. If I go back here, there's something like this. You want to know how many JavaScripts you are downloading, how your page is downloading, how many CSS and all that. You may also want to know the response time of each JavaScript. And you also, especially this is becoming true because a lot of logic nowadays is being pushed on the browser side. So it's no longer server-side heavy. It's the JavaScript is becoming more and more. If you're running Node.js or anything like that, JavaScript is becoming very, very popular. So you want to know how much images you are downloading. What is the expiration of your images? Are you caching this image? You may have enabled caching, but the expiration on the image may be so small that the browser has to go back to the server every time. Or there is setting in the browser that can say, even though for every image that it gets, it may say, has it changed? Even though the image may be cached on the browser may still go to the server saying, has this image changed? Unless the image changes a lot, you don't want to do that. If it is a logo of your company, it doesn't change. So why go even to the server to find out whether the image has changed or not? So those kind of small things make huge impact on the response time. So we see this is very, very critical, this one and these kind of things. In this case, you may want to say that, of course, I will definitely reduce this to like few kilobytes, not 370 kilobytes. But when I go in here, when I look at other JavaScript and CSS, which are huge, I may want to say whether can I minimize this JavaScript? Can I remove all the spaces and compress this JavaScript so that my size of my JavaScript gets? So these are the things that you need to pay a lot more attention because the websites and mobile sites are becoming very, very complex. You're no longer contained within your environment, you're making third-party code, you want to capture that also. And of course, you want to pay attention to your server side, which is we have been doing a lot, and I'm sure you guys are doing a lot. We have been paying a lot of attention to your server side. Other thing that we are seeing is that you have your website, which is getting great, but now you have a mobile version of it. How is that? Do you have a dedicated mobile your company name.com, or are you having a dedicated different page for your mobile? That strategy makes a lot of difference in response time. Like when I look at United.com, I don't want to go through all the different ads that are coming on my mobile page for United.com. I want to have check-ins, my status of the flight, few things. I don't want those heavy images to be downloaded to my mobile site. And when we look at the mobile apps, again the same thing. Are you making too many calls to your server to render your mobile app or to make the mobile app come up? The startup time of your mobile app, you want to capture that. Again, that is becoming interesting issue, not issue, but interesting challenge. How do you test your mobile apps? How do you test your mobile apps from East Coast to West Coast to different parts of the world. Mobile response time of 10 seconds from a village in China which has a 2G network is maybe acceptable. But a 4G network in Tokyo, 10-second response time may not be acceptable at all. So they base upon the end user response time, end user index, that what we call about, what we talk about is end user response time, what action they are taking, whether it's taking, what network they are coming on, whether the application is, the mobile app is crashing or not. All that things impact your end users. It's important to keep an eye on it. Any of you guys building mobile apps or mobile web? How are you guys testing your mobile apps? Like besides your own lab?
We have a kind of a Selenium grid upstairs where there's a bunch of desktops all stacked on top of each other. Like the grid just disperses things, and I think that they have a Mac on there, and I think they've rigged it up some way so they can actually run it inside of the development kit.
Oh,
So that way they're actually going, as a user, going through and just running garage and testing it.
so basically Selenium is simulating a mobile WebKit.
So yeah, there's a Windows computer with an older browser, a newer browser, like 6 Windows computers stacked up, some Mac computers, and then some Mac computers that run like the development kit.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it makes it like you're actually running
Yeah.
on the browser itself.
But what about if this is an app or an application that is available to your end users, which are not your employees, or even exposed to employees which are not in this center, but they may be all over US. How do you have things like that sitting in different parts that are testing it for you?
I've not heard anybody that has that.
Okay.
AWS device works, we can do it dispersed.
Using AWS? Yeah, okay.
Device works. Not be device works. There's some, just device farm.
Okay.
Have you done it?
We have customers that are doing it with that are using now they're one of the product that we have is they're putting the iPhone the whole hardware, and they're running the whole application, the mobile application or the mobile web from that particular device from all over the world. So then you can test your response time from all, you can choose the location, it will hit your site and then show you exactly about how long it took to execute the mobile app or the web request. Because again with the mobile app, the mobile web app for example, is that if you just test the web requests that are coming from your or web service call that is coming from your mobile phone, that's one kind of test, but you still want to make sure that if your mobile web has JavaScript and it runs faster within a real actual device. Right? So you want to test that. And we have customers as well who are really demanding that. It's no longer okay to test it locally. It's no longer okay to test only the web requests from all over the world. They really want the real devices launching this and running the app for them. Especially when you deploy a new module, you want to know at 2 a.m. in the morning when you deploy it that whether it's working fine or not before 6 a.m. happens when you really start to use it.
Seems like a task you can put up on Amazon's Mechanical Turk. Just have people use your mobile phone to go to my site and make sure that you sign in with this user credentials.
Yeah, so it's like a recorder.
Here's your nickel.
Browser shops will do it for they don't necessarily have mobile apps. I was checking if they did. There's one other site that has like some of the mobile devices. It's kind of like browser shots. I don't know if you ever use that where it'll go to your website and show you that page. It doesn't necessarily give you metrics, but it'll show you what that looks like so you can kind of validate that it's looking consistent. So
Yeah, other thing that you're absolutely right. So there are customers I've seen customers that are saying, I want to know whether my site is up or not. Some customers saying, I want to know that, but I also want to know whether people are able to log in and do some more complex activity or not. So they want to know that They want to, different customers have different needs, that's what I'm seeing, whether the site is up. Some people just want ping. Some just want to say whether my URL is coming back with a 200 or not. Some customer says, no, I cannot afford to just have that. I want to know whether my customer, especially insurance companies are saying, whether customers are able to log in, are they able to go through every step of quoting process and make sure that none of the steps is broken, because if I'm going on the insurance side, if I'm not able to get a quote of my auto insurance, I'll go to the competition. They cannot afford to do that. Other thing that we are seeing a lot is customers are saying, one other thing that you want to know is how many customers are really using IE6, IE7, IE8, IE9. Because when there's a huge cost in making sure if customers are not using IE6 or 7 or 8, you don't want to spend energy in your QA environment to make sure that you're testing against those versions. So knowing which your usage pattern of the end users is also important. And a lot of customers are looking for that kind of data because there's a huge effort. I was talking to one customer there where I said that, do you think that your customers are using IE6? And she said, yes. This is, you might have heard of Wyndham hotels. They also have vacation rentals, Wyndham. And
I think they're in a litigation with the receiver.
really?
I think go ahead, I'm sorry.
DMB.
No, so this is Wyndham chain. So they have a hotel segment and then they have vacation rentals. And what the person was telling me is that for vacation rentals, they have a lot of customers from Florida who are 70 or 80 years old because these guys own the properties, rent the properties. They are still using Windows 95 older machines and they are using IE6, so they have to support it because that is the biggest customer base they have. But when you go to some other customers, like insurance companies, they may not have that problem. So the problem patterns are so different, but you need to know, again, at metrics that you want to know, how many customers are using which version of browser, which version of mobile operating system, because that makes a huge difference in your testing environment and the effort that you have to make sure that it doesn't break under different IE version or different operating system version. So again, ultimately, at the end, I just want to say that to really build better software to go faster, same thing again, is to make sure that you look at the key metrics. The key metrics are very, very important because without that, you really don't have a baseline to say whether it's okay to go or no go, as well as when the operations guys say that it's taking 6 seconds, you need to be able to say whether it's okay, 6 seconds is okay or not. Because if you don't have a baseline, there's nothing you can compare against. I think that's the same thing here. Any questions or any thoughts, any thought about metrics? I don't know whether I think there's already been a good discussion on this already.
In the beginning, you were talking about 5 million taxi.
Yeah.
1 million.
Yes.
Do you think population density has anything to do with that measure?
Absolutely. I think that is, so the question is whether population density, absolutely.
So that would be kind of skewed as far as.
You're still gonna have money and capitals based on it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
$1 million versus $5 million, doesn't matter how many people.
Absolutely. I think that the point that I was trying to bring here is that, like in India, like I was reading in today itself, like Uber is saying that we want to change the culture in India where we don't want people to buy cars because we are providing a service where you can transport from one location to another location without owning a car. Parking is expensive, it's impossible to find parking in places like Mumbai and New Delhi, and we'll provide that service to you. So why do you want to buy a car? But the interesting thing there is that culturally in places like China and India, owning a car is a status symbol. So even though you're providing this kind of thing, people are still going to buy cars because I want to show that I have 2 cars or 1 car. So that is playing a factor for Uber. They're going to spend $1 billion on it, right? And GM is spending $1 billion on it because GM is saying that there's so much demand for my car that I'd rather spend $1 billion and let people in India buy my car or China. Ford is again, Focus is apparently is the most popular car, Ford car in China right now. And Uber is saying, no, don't buy it. So it's like you have of course in India and China there's a huge population, no doubt on that. And that's why you have such a big shift between Uber having 1 billion taxis compared to Didi, which is 5 million.
Going to the important metrics, right? Drive times and stuff, I'm sure would all be relevant, but they would never release that.
And also, I was kind of reading on Uber is that sometimes when you launch the mobile app, they show you which is the nearest taxi around you or how many near. Some of the data is fake data. It's not like really, they just want to, apparently showing more number of people or taxis available near you to give you the impression that they are available so fast to you, right? And some of them data is fake, which is again an interesting user experience, right?
So what are the competitors like the business side? Who are the competitors and how you are different from how this product is different from the competitors' product?
Can you repeat that again?
How are you
business? Yeah.
How are we?
Perspective. I know CS, UEM. There are some tools who do these kind of activities.
Yeah.
Who is your best competitor? What is top 3 competitors and how you are different from them?
So the biggest difference, so the question is how are we different from our competitors? The biggest thing that we believe is user experience. Right? And one thing that, when I talk about these metrics, we are the only vendor in the market in this space that is capturing every user action, every transaction. We are not sampling, we are not snapshotting, because to find complex problems, you need all the data. And we have seen that over and over again across the board, across the industry, across our customer base, where I said, customers who have looked at other tools, who have bought other tools, and then realize that it satisfies certain percentage of their problems, but to really find some of the nasty problems, they need to capture all the transactions. So when we talk about user experience part, we capture every click on your mobile device, every click on your site, and show you how is that affecting end to end. Yes.
Do you guys, so I guess to kind of extend, what are some of the competitors, and do you guys measure your impact on the performance? Because in theory, if you're capturing every click, that's a data point that's now going to have to be sent, and every action is going to then considerably kind of dominate.
Absolutely. So the question is, who are our competition? Some of the competition that we see is New Relic and App Dynamics, right? And again, the question comes is, what is the impact that if we are capturing everything, what is the impact? Over and over again, among thousands of customers we have shown that our impact is less than 1% on your response time.
It means that the whole servers, for the entire environment, the server utilization for running the collection of the data is very minimal, you are saying?
Yes.
I mean to say, like, even though we are deploying Dynatrace product in that server, the footprint of the server is low, like less than 1%, right?
So what I'm saying is 1% on your response time.
Okay.
So if your application is going to 15 different tiers, it doesn't matter. If your end user response time, we are showing either almost negligible or 1% response time. As far as the memory footprint is concerned, we are using 40 MB of in case of Java, 40 MB of heap. That is fixed. We do not grow based upon the load. And CPU will not see any impact at all.
Any kind of profiling and these kind of tools when you're collecting the data, for example, we use JProfiler and some tools.
Yeah.
When you're doing that profiling impacts the JVM. So we intentionally go to the other servers and again install that, and again we go to collect the data. Again, network is a problem. So any performance tool, any product in the market, we're collecting all the data. The biggest problem is how the product is utilizing the server or the existing performance resources with respect to network, JVMs, and maybe a database inputs and all these things.
Yeah.
So that kind of statistics will really help us to decide, okay, this is best.
Yeah, absolutely. And
That's what even I did that for Dynatrace
Yeah.
in my company.
Yeah, I agree. If we are, as a performance management tool, if we are impacting your performance, you will never deploy us in any of your environment. You will not put us in development, you will not put us in QA, you will not put us in production. We have huge retailers, the biggest top 5 retailers, top 10 retailers using us in production 24/7. We have top banks using us 24/7. Trading banks that are using it in production. They would not put us, even touch us, or they will keep us at an arm distance if we were a little bit higher in the response time.
But I mean, how would they know if in theory they're using your tools to determine performance?
Because when basically we invite you, when we say test our tool, we invite you to do purely apples to apple comparison. Test it your response time with us and without us and compare. Right? Because we can come up, we can say we are 0%. You will never believe us for you to really know that, you will make sure that what we are saying is true. And we have testament from companies over and over again that when we said is 1% or less than 1%, they have proven it to themselves. Otherwise, they will not even touch us. And yeah.
So in addition to the JVM, sorry.
Go ahead, sorry.
In addition to the JVM, like what other stacks do you?
So we support .NET, JVM, Node.js, PHP, web servers, message brokers, mainframe.
Django or Rails or?
No, we are not. We have plans to come for in near future for Python and for Rails. Oh, sorry, not Rails, for Ruby. Yeah.
How do you get the metrics into consumable format? Basically, you have an agent that runs an app or whatever. Can you send that off to your data centers, or is there a local repository?
So the question is, how do we collect the data? And that's the biggest difference between how we do it and how the competition does. We have an agent that goes into your tier. That agent is a dump agent. It's just sending data away from your JVM or whatever technology you're using into our server, which could be running in the cloud that we manage, it could be running in the cloud that you manage, or it could be running into your own data center based upon your choice. We have all the choices you want. So we have a lot of insurance companies that are running our server within their own data center because they don't want the data to go out in the cloud. We have Adobe systems that is running everything in the cloud. They have their own private cloud. They have a dedicated pipeline from their data center into AWS. They are putting us in the cloud. We have customers that are asking us to deploy our server in our own cloud, and they are sending data over there. Because our agent do not do any processing on your application tier, the overhead is so low. That's the key difference. Plus, we are native agent. We are not, in case of Java, we are native. So we have not a lot of, and some of the competition that we have is not a native agent. So what it means that when the load increases, their agent is also consuming the heap. In our case, the heap size remains fixed, never changes irrespective of the load. So we have CS that is running on a Black Friday, millions of transactions happening every hour, and they've been using it forever. That one just wanted to take a step back. Did it make sense? Was it valuable? The metrics part of it, keeping the product side aside, keeping the metrics point of view. Did it make sense or valuable?
Have you seen the open source build tool that exists for some of the Git repos where you can tie that to your build system on a GitHub project? And if you're an open source project, they'll actually do the auto build testing for you.
Travis?
Travis,
I think so. I can't remember right now.
What's the name again?
Travis,
Travis,
yeah.
No, I have not seen that, but I can look it up though.
That's more equivalent to Jenkins though. You put a script in and you say,
So
We
this,
try to-
you said this plugs into Jenkins. I'd be interested in seeing if you're going to do any demos, like how that.
Yeah,
how that
so
fits into Jenkins.
my intention here was not to kind of promote the product, but yes, we do integrate with Jenkins. And the way it works is that we have plugins for Maven. So when you run a Maven JUnit test, for example, we have you attach us in during a JUnit test in case of Java. And then we have a dedicated section in our tool that captures all the metrics of your unit test. And then we have a plugin for Jenkins that pulls the data from our tool and brings it into a Jenkins view.
So you just update your POM with the next
Yes.
section.
Exactly.
It invokes this through the Maven lifecycle.
Exactly.
Oh, that's pretty.
And then after you have done the test, our tool has collected all the data, and then Jenkins using a REST API call, you can bring our data back into Jenkins view or UI and look at the data there.
Similar to a lot of other Jenkins plugins where you just use the UUID to
Yes.
make sure that the two sync.
Exactly. So that customers, the way they are using it is that they make a call, they look at the data in Jenkins UI. Unless they see something wrong, they never go to our tool. They say, yeah, everything is good. But if something shows red in the plugin, Jenkins plugin, then they say something has gone wrong, or they exactly know what time period has gone wrong. They can quickly go into our tool and look at every transaction during that time and say, okay, this one has failed, this one has failed, or this one has failed.
Yeah, I think that, so to answer your question, I think the measurement thing is awesome. I've actually had conversations with different people in the room going about, we should do this, we should do this. It helped me ideate a bunch of things. But then I think that key point that you just said right there is like, if you don't have to go do anything, then you don't.
Yeah,
I think that's the biggest part about measurement
yeah.
is not just measurement, but the follow-up of what's the moment.
Because you're doing so many builds in a day, in an hour, that you don't want to go to any of the tools unless there's a red flag or Jenkins or our tool has sent an alert to you saying that something has gone wrong.
I really have enough time for all the red flags.
Yeah.
I can't go to everything.
Yeah.
Can you do alerting
Yes.
based on threshold? Can you post to Slack?
Yes. So in our tool, you can define somebody said that you can define plus minus 10% of whatever it is ratio that you want. What happens is that when you load the unit test, our tool learns about your application. Said based upon this test that you run, I know it creates a golden baseline. And then you can say based upon that, if it goes plus minus X percentage, that is acceptable. But beyond that, it is not acceptable. You may create a new module that may throw your numbers off, but you can say no, those are the new numbers, and you can ask Dynatrace to say no, re-baseline again.
So can you post to Slack? The question is, do you use Slack?
Well, Jenkins can post to Slack. They'll
Oh, okay, yeah. Rely on something else that will change.
I did have one question.
Yeah.
So whether we're doing functional unit tests or even with like 5 watch alarms, we can do a lot of that with various templating and programming languages. And throw that in our code. The developers can really integrate with the process of setting up the metrics. What is configuring this product like? Do we all go to your website or to the service, and is it mostly GUI to configure it?
Yeah, so to configure it, you don't, first of all, the beauty is that you don't have to change a single piece of code.
Okay.
You put our, in case of Java, .NET, or even Node.js, you include our agent into your startup script. Our agent gets loaded as part of your application, start collecting data automatically.
Yeah, for like I guess more for like alarms or thresholds. Is that just are there like automatic thresholds that are set in the
Yes.
system?
So you can, as far as the alarms are concerned, you can choose or you can have both. That is also automatically just baselining for you for 1 week. It will start collecting data baselining immediately, and it will keep the data for 1 week. And then it will say on Monday 9 a.m. I expect this much throughput. And if my throughput decreases or increases too much, or if my failure rate goes too high at 9 a.m. on Monday last week and 9 a.m. Monday this week, it can generate alerts for you.
Yeah, so but you're going into the actual application to saying my threshold, if it drops, or my throughput drops below this number, my latency drops below this number and send out the alert at that time.
So we are getting automatic baseline, automatically sending alerts to you if it goes over the baseline. But you can also say, no, I want a hard number for my baseline, and then Dynatrace will use that instead of using the baseline. So it's your choice which one you want, right? Because your application is changing behavior every time. So you don't want, some customer says, I want the tool to automatically learn, and that's where the baseline comes into picture. Some customer says, no, I have a hard limit, login should never take more than 2 seconds. I don't care when they put a hard line. So it depends upon different customer usage. You can choose one or the other, or both.
So the question I just had towards you is a lot of this stuff seems to be structured in infrastructure, right? Which works great when you have that kind of deployment.
Yeah.
And maybe really the scope here. But for when you have like open source projects where you have different users using it for different infrastructure status, one of the kind of really good points I think you made was connecting the build process with what your architecture is and kind of being able to detect that.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of real option there for the open source solutions where you don't necessarily have an infrastructure deployment for catching those architecture shifts, or not really?
So you're saying that, like, going back to the GitHub example that you had?
Yeah.
So so you're saying is, when you upload your project into GitHub, you're saying there are tools that will automatically start.
So yeah, you can automatically run unit tests, Travis, right?
Okay.
And I actually have kind of an infrastructure, so I may be off base, but like I've worked with different open source tools and being able to see if a recent commit, like or a reversion, like the XML bug that you brought up, right?
Yeah.
Being able to see those tools and their kind of system call reactions as they grow over time is kind of an important note to be able to see before I decide if I'm going to upgrade.
Yeah.
Because you can see the different versions between that, and I didn't know if there's really a way to capture that information or not really beyond putting it on your own infrastructure.
So my answer is this: if you're using open source code, you're downloading it from GitHub or whatever it is. If we make ourselves, and suppose we are able to do this, to say that anybody checks in anything into GitHub, start running our baselining thing and all that, like you're saying basically proactively monitor some open source project.
So kind of what I'm asking, right, is there an easy way to kind of get the architecture specs very quickly? Because I mean, one thing I can think of doing, right, is just throwing a VirtualBox VM, checking it out, and then kind of running the unit test, and then capturing the architecture, and then doing that. And then there's things like Docker that kind of enable that feature. I just didn't know if you knew of any kind of solutions that are out there that are kind of open source and free to be able to already do that, knowing that it's kind of a valid point. Like, or foundations, like I don't know if people use Zerb's foundation framework, but I'll use that, and depending on when I want to update to kind of find out metric decisions is kind of an important factor. And I just don't know if there's any kind of easy way to do that other than kind of manually going through the effort and doing that validation, which can be a bit of time. I mean, it's time consuming. It isn't something I necessarily want to spend time on.
One thing that I have seen customers do it, and I've worked with some customers that as they're building Docker images, they are as part of the Docker file. One customer is like as they're downloading open source project and using a Docker file to create these images, they are putting our agents as part of the Docker file, which it will download our agent for them, include that agent as part of the image building, and as the container is being built and run, our agent is already part of the solution. But whether we are doing any other way, I don't.
And I didn't necessarily mean to target the platform, or just kind of a neutral solution towards being able to implement some of the suggestions that, that are agnostic of the tools.
No, I think what you're asking is absolutely makes sense, right? Because whether you want to maintain a position to say whether I should upgrade to this version of open source project or should I stay with the older version, because I don't know what has changed and how is that going to impact my application. You don't have the data point with you, and you want to know that before you make a change in your application, and before you choose to upgrade or not. And I don't have the answer for you right now whether there's a way to do that automatically. unless totally checking it out, testing it
Yeah,
out.
there's a way. There's a way to get to
Yeah.
that position, but you always end up kind of putting on your own infrastructure,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
kind of the as opposed to kind of a wide, like Travis, you can go actually see, oh, this doesn't build, I'm not going to use this. So
Yeah. The one thing that I'm thinking in my mind, and I don't have the question that I'm asking to the audience is, when you suppose you are contributing to an open source project, you're contributing to an open source project in GitHub, will GitHub allow any tools like performance tools to quickly do some analysis for them automatically? Will it? Is that available? Is there an API available? Some kind of a hook available in GitHub that can say, when I check in, not only to make sure that it builds, but also make sure that it performs.
I don't think you're going to be able to trigger remote hooks,
Okay.
but you should be able to pull RSS and react based on RSS.
Yeah.
But I mean, and that kind of thing is like, so when we talk about kind of these tools and stuff,
Yeah.
it's very much when you're in your infrastructure, it's easy. But
Yeah.
like if you're trying to kind of even if you're releasing open source, right, and you want people to make decisions based on kind of what this was talked about, getting that data just doesn't seem kind of feasible. So
Yeah, it is. I totally see your point. I'm just trying to see how to hook in there. Like, I'm thinking about technical way to make sure that it happens automatically, so that the wider audience that is interested in that version gets a quick review about whether they should upgrade or not. Right? I'm trying to think about. I don't have the answer right now on top of my mind, but I'm thinking technically is how do I create kind of hook in any tool into an open source project. Right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, because Travis does it, right? They trigger those builds and run the builds on the system. So I don't know how they do that, but it has to be possible.
Maybe I'll look into that.
And it might be easier with Travis too, because they're not connected to third-party services or data sources, or I imagine this still has a few more dependencies that you have to configure in your application just to get it initialized.
So I have a question and a comment. So the question first, and that is, do you have a module for Puppet
Yes.
that works good?
Yes.
Because I'm a long-term New Relic user, and if you've got a plugin or if you've got a module that works with Puppet, you're way a step ahead of them. And then the comment, the discussion here, and when I think about a Jenkins environment, but it really is the environment's kind of irrelevant, and that is that when I'm working on this kind of task, what I want is to constantly ratchet up the level of confidence that I have that this code is going to go out there and operate. And so I don't necessarily want stuff hidden from me. I want to know that there's 10 criteria that I care about and that I've got data on all 10.
Yeah.
I don't want to know that, because it starts to degenerate into I passed the guy from QA in the hall and he says we're good to go. And I didn't like that then and I don't like that now and I don't want to do that. To me, the hard part is, and it depends on the code environment, it depends on the system environment, the architecture, and everything else you have to contend with, is how many of those 10 spots can you fill in? Because the first thing out of the bag is you think to yourself, well, I know if I'm checking code into GitHub or if I'm checking it in through Jenkins, whatever, I can run unit tests on it if I've got unit tests. Well, if I don't have a unit test, I'm not running any unit tests. I can run code quality on it, whether the developer likes it or not, and I can at least get some information there. I run into situations where the code quality checks in Jenkins took so long that it would be the next night before I'd know whether the code was any good.
Okay.
Because I've got that many failures. But if I can get beyond those steps, then what I really like, and I've seen in a lot of the tools over the years, and that is when you start to step beyond that and you say, okay, yeah, the unit test run, and yeah, you've got decent code quality, or at least an acceptable level of code quality, but then the next thing, you start getting into the acceptance test realm, which is, back the infamous, I put a quarter in a jukebox and it's supposed to play 3 songs for me. Did it play 3 songs?
Yeah.
And if it won't do that for me, then I'm back to hiring some guy to sit in front of the machine and do QA for me. And then I got to trust whether he runs all the tests. And then I got to know how many million tests do I have, et cetera, et cetera. So, again, if we think simply that there's 10 spots there that I want to fill to be confident that this thing's going to run, and I got to be able to fill all those 10 spots. And each one of these tools that comes out covers a broader set of that space. I really like seeing not just can I go in and find a stack trace on what that PHP script did and what the SQL did behind it, but I mean, the infamous example of 75 SQL requests to get something to run. I mean, I run into that constantly. And to be able to pull that forward, because that basically says, this code doesn't run well, period. It is not effective, and if you put a load on it, it will fail. I guess that's down at that other end. You throw a load on it, and where does that come in? So that's number 9, and from my perspective, number 10 is you set it down in front of the user and say, do you understand how to make this work? Now, I've spent my career doing user interface design and usability testing, and I can tell you, time and again, the times I have sat down with a piece of software from the development team that was set to do 10 things, if we had an acceptance test for all 10 of those things, I would have never run that usability study because it wouldn't do 9 out of 10. They don't execute. Why are we talking to a customer? Why are we sitting somebody down in front of them? 9 out of 10 objectives of the software do not execute right now. Don't want to run a test on it. The other thing is, if you set somebody down in front of them, they go, this is great software, I love it, it's beautiful, it's exciting. Sorry I couldn't do the jobs. If I was a good person with computers, I could have done this stuff. But the bottom line was, no, they couldn't do it because they couldn't figure it out.
So there are 2 components, I think, if I'm hearing what you're saying is, one is the design of the application, right? Whether you put somebody else in, if somebody asks somebody else to test your application, put them in front of the computer, say, can you go through the steps from now? So that is more of the UI design, the business logic that you have put together that is intuitive for the person to say, okay, I know what, I get what it is asking me to fill, I can fill that up and go through the steps.
I can execute, I can get the outcome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if I'm confused, if the UI is so confusing that I don't know what to do, then that's a design and the business logic flaw, a business view flaw, right? A design flaw. Then there's another component that you're suggesting, which is right, is I want, if the UI test passes, people are able to execute those steps. The next thing is the code quality good enough for me to promote it to the next level? From 2 factors, from the performance factor and the code quality itself, right? Both are important because you may have a very high performance tool or code that is being written that may perform very well. But when you look at the quality of it, can somebody else read your code, and suppose you leave the company, can somebody take the ownership of that? That's another issue. I totally get it, because, so I think from the first point of view, the UI design point of view, the APM tools do not go into that, right?
They'll get there.
Okay.
They'll get there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's AI though, man.
Nah.
But what we have seen, but you're right about that, because what we have seen is this. We have a user experience management tool which really tells you which user from which part of the world, which browser, which operating system they came in, and what clicks they did. So, not really answering the full part of the thing, but a lot of insurance companies, the banking companies are asking is, we have built our site in a certain way. Looking at using our tool, they are saying, this is giving me info. I expected a user to follow a certain path, but this tool, now we're using our tool, they can say, oh, they're not following that path. They're saying that either we have not designed it well, or the customer is choosing a different path, we need to adopt to that. And again, because, as I mentioned earlier, is because we are capturing every click, we have that business intelligence data sitting there to tell you that when people go for quotes for insurance, for example, and then you can say some people went to step 1 and step 2 and abandoned, or some went from step 1 to step 2, but then a lot of people are abandoning at step 3. That gives a lot of business insight saying, oh, the step 3 is so complex that people get overwhelmed and they're leaving the site, right? So that's the kind of thing that we are capturing, but that's helping the business users and the UI designers to say, let's rework the step number 3 so that it's easier for people to go through all the steps. From the code quality point of view, from that perspective, we are not looking into your code to see whether it's written very well or not. But what we are seeing, a side effect of our tool is, because we are able to show, a lot of customers are saying that because we are providing so much insight into the code, that as a new person who comes into the team and learn about the code, they can quickly look at our UI and quickly understand the path the code is taking. Instead of looking at the code, reading through the code, they get quick insight into about how the code is traversing. We also build sequence diagrams in our tool. You can say, oh, this API is making call to this API, and so on. So the new person joining the team quickly learns the product pretty well. But if a piece of code is hanging in there, which is never executed, we'll never know about it. But a code quality tool, it may take a long time for it to figure it out, but we cannot tell you that, oh, this module or this package that you have is no longer used. You can find out by looking at the code that we're capturing, but we cannot alert you saying that, oh, this package is obsolete, throw it away. Right?
Well, I am a big fan of these tools. They serve a huge, or provide huge value. And to me, again, it's a confidence level issue.
Yeah.
You cannot afford to stick things out in the community, out in the face of the customer, if you don't have confidence they're going to run.
Yeah. In some of the presentation that I have a slide that says that I do not do testing, but when I do it in production. That's
Yes.
the most interesting matter, exactly, right? It is funny, but it is still happening.
Well, the classic use of New Relic when I first introduced it was, well, we'll make the change on production, and if the errors show up in New Relic, then we'll pull it back to development and see what we need to do.
Wow.
So that was terrifying.
Yeah, it is. Because your end users are not you don't want to test against them, right? The risk is too high, especially in this age, the risk is too high. The social media and all that is becoming so prevalent that it can damage we have a customer, actually, insurance company, I won't name them. They are performance is so important to them that if somebody uses their mobile app, it crashes, error happens, they see that somebody has posted on social media or Twitter or anything or on the app store, because they're using our tool, they can say, oh, this user has posted this image. They quickly go into our tool and say, oh, this is exactly what happened and why they errored out. They reach out to the customer saying that we are sorry about it, we have fixed it. So, yes, there is a little bit of brand damage, but the fact that these guys are reaching out to that customer saying that we have found it changes the whole impression of the brand. They said, okay, these guys care about me, right? Mm-hmm. That data is also so significant to them that they want to eliminate any problems on the site or the mobile device, but if it happens, they have all the data in their hand to go back to saying that we know why it happened.
Visibility.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cannot fly blind anymore. Right? I wish, like you mentioned JProfile, or somebody mentioned JProfile. I have used JProfile in the past. Great tool. I used it like almost 10 years back. but again, I could only run on my desktop. I just cannot run it anywhere else because it would kill my application. I mean, in those days, this is even before, this is the time when Wiley was coming up, right? And JProfiler was the tool that gave me insight. I used it because that was available at the time. So, but now if I had tools like this, I would be in heaven, because this is allowing me to innovate instead of being chased by the tester, by the QA team. I'm happy now spending more time building new stuff, learning new stuff. Like, oh, how can I build my code into Docker instead of going back to the old code and trying to fix it because the QA team is just bugging me all night. So, any other questions, guys? I'll definitely look up Travis and see what I can do on that. Nice guy.